Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Thank you, Letic7. All right. Octavian attacks Pompey. Pompey attacks Pompey. Mylae 36 BC. When did Caesar die? 44 BC. Okay. So when did Augustus die?
Yeah, I'll react to that, sure.
Oh, you will? Thanks, man. That was my other video, that I'll react to that, sure. Gaius Julius Caesar Octavianus. So, Octavian Augustus started the trend of, like, keeping the Caesar as the title, I'm guessing. A lot of kids. Died 14 AD, born 63 BC. Okay, all right. For some reason, I pictured him living more in the AD, but okay. He was born 63. So he is 27 years old here. Right? 2 years younger than me. Jeez, what am I doing with my life? He's... Okay, let's go, guys. Agrippa is in this one. Let's do it. If you are not ready to learn, you're in the wrong class. Get pumped. History. I know, guys. I haven't been doing as much history, but I love learning about history. I know a lot of the other stuff is more popular with you guys, but I really love when there's no greater feeling that when I watch a history video and I get a good amount of views, you know. If it's over 1,000 on these videos, I'll be a happy man, you know. Let's go. My name's Connor, by the way. Hi.
In previous episodes covering the period between 41 and 38 BC, we saw how Octavian defeated Mark Antony's brother Lucius and his wife Fulvia in Italy, while Antony's lieutenant Ventidius successfully repulsed a Pompeian Parthian invasion in the east. At the same time, the uneasy alliance agreed at Misenum between Octavian, Antony, and Sextus Pompey had disintegrated, despite the three men all being linked by marriage. The Peace of Misenum was broken less than a year after it was made, and the Sicilian War reignited. In this episode, we shall cover Octavian's planned invasion of the island, and the numerous disasters that plagued the expedition.
Navy episode.
When the Romans conquered a new territory.
Ad time. I have an ad sense.
There was always one surprise.
Guys, make sure to use, it's going to be a Masterworks ad right here. Use the /Kings and Generals, all right? We're watching his content. Least we can do, all right?
Thing they left behind. Massive colosseums. You see, gladiatorial combat was big business. The gladiators themselves were huge celebrities, rivaling the modern world's star athletes. But for these gladiators' financial backers, the rewards of success were incredibly lucrative, even when the Roman economy was suffering. Today, there are similar overlooked opportunities that allow savvy investors to see profit, even when other investments are tanking. But it's way easier to get in. Take today's sponsor, Masterworks, for example. Located in New York City's financial district, Masterworks has unlocked the potential of a $1.7 trillion alternative investment class, contemporary art, enabling everyday investors to enter the previously billionaire-driven art market without spending
I have to pee
millions.
quick, guys. I'm gonna try and go quick.
Because unlike traditional investments like stocks and bonds, art's value may be less affected by current events. While many markets were crushed in 2022, Masterworks saw 9 returns of 9%, 10%, 13%, 17%, 21%, 27%, 33%, 35%, and 36%, netting tens of millions for their investors. In fact, their performance has been so strong, CNBC, Forbes, CNN, and others are raving about the company. With numbers like that, you can see why over 617,000 people have become members. In fact, demand is so high that offerings have sold out within hours, meaning you might miss your chance quickly. But our subscribers can open a free, no-obligation account right now at the link in the description.
Okay, sorry. I didn't make it. It turned into something else. Too much information. Gross. Sorry. I washed my hands and used Purell. All right. So, all right, we're good. Sorry. Go.
Octavian likely had been actively looking for reasons to undermine the peace treaty and declare war on Sextus. Antony's extortion of Sextus's provinces and the defection of Menas likely had been actively looking for reasons to undermine the peace treaty and declare war on Sextus. Antony's extortion of Sextus's provinces and the defection of Menas to Octavian had certainly been significant factors, but more importantly, Octavian's forces had also captured pirates around the Mediterranean who Octavian proclaimed were in service to Sextus, despite Sextus denying this. To add personal insult to this, Octavian divorced Scribonia, the daughter of Sextus's brother-in-law. Even more egregiously, Octavian had declared this divorce in October 39 BC, immediately after Scribonia gave birth to his only natural child, Julia. In all likelihood, Octavian had used the Pact of Misenum merely to buy time to consolidate his position until he was ready.
Is that still a legitimate child if it was born before the divorce?
Spring of 38 till he was ready. By the spring of 38 BC, his forces were amassed, though the precise numbers for this time are unclear. Almost non-stop war had drained Italy of its manpower, but soldiers had been raised from provinces in Illyria, Gaul, and Hispania. Octavian would have had approximately 25 legions under his command, though how many he had immediate access to is unknown. His fleet size is also hard to know, though it must have been large enough for Octavian to feel confident to challenge Sextus, so perhaps 150 to 200 warships would be a reasonable estimate. Octavian split this force into two parts, planning to attack Sicily from two fronts. The first, sailing from Etruria, would be commanded by the defector Menas and Calvisius Sabinus, an officer who had served competently under Caesar's command during the Pharsalus campaign. The second, leaving from Tarentum, would be commanded by Octavian himself. The army, meanwhile, would march down to Rhegium in preparation to be transported across to Sicily once the Pompeian fleet had been annihilated. Upon hearing of these movements, Sextus similarly divided his navy into two, commanding one portion in Messana, awaiting Octavian's arrival, while sending a second portion under his freedman Menecrates to confront Menas and Calvisius. Menecrates' fleet came upon the Etrurian fleet at night near Cumae. However, neither side wished to risk a dangerous night battle, so Menas and Calvius retreated into the bay. When morning broke, they drew their fleet up in a defensive crescent formation, with Menas commanding the left and Calvisius the right, positioning themselves as close to the shore as possible so that Menecrates' ships would not be able to break through their line.
I would love to see how skilled the rowers were. Like, it's warfare, they're rowers that just like, all right, turn this way. I wonder how like in sync they were and just like, stop. Go. Did they have like flags to say like right side stop, or like both sides go, left side stop rowing, or something like that?
Menecrates exploited this, attacking across the line and pushing Octavian's fleet back, where many of their ships were either beached or caught on rocks and rendered immobile. Menecrates, with the advantage of the open sea at his back, was able to continually cycle fresh ships into the fight, while much of the Caesarian fleet was effectively stranded. In Appian's words, it was as if Menas and Calvius' men were like land forces contending against sea forces. As the battle raged, Menecrates caught sight of Menas' ship and ordered his vessel to attack. The two ships rammed into each other and grapples were thrown, binding the two ships together, with fierce fighting breaking out on the decks. Menas' ship was slightly taller than Menecrates', so his men had a slight advantage, as arrows, stones, and javelins flew between the two crews. During the fighting, both commanders were wounded. Menas was shot through the arm with an arrow, and Menecrates took a javelin to the thigh. The latter was rendered unable to fight, but continued to urge his men on. Despite their brave fighting, however, Menes's men gradually got the upper hand, and rather than be taken captive, Menecrates flung himself into the sea and drowned. Calvisius, keen to capitalize on this success, moved his ship and a few others to Menes's flank, managing to cut off part of the Pompeian ships there and forcing them to retreat, with Calvisius in pursuit. Nonetheless, the move had weakened the Caesarian right, and many were destroyed or burnt on the rocks, the remnants only being saved by the return of Calvisius's ships. The battle ended as night fell. The Caesarians had had the worst of the fighting, losing far more vessels than the Pompeians. Nevertheless, with the death of...
Guys, I know this isn't a war-related question, but there has to be loads and loads and loads of sunken ancient ships, whether trade ships or warships, with a ton of artifacts on them. I'm sure, obviously, historians know this, archaeologists know this, and treasure hunters, but I mean, there's got to be so many that you can't get to all of them. I wonder, like, what the estimate is of how many of these ancient warships during, like, the Roman period, or even a bit after, are, like, undiscovered with, like, ancient swords and artifacts on them, maybe still, or in bad condition, but I just,
fighting, losing funded as night fell. The Caesarians had had the worst of the fighting, losing far more vessels than the Pompeians. Nevertheless, with the death of Menecrates, the Pompeians had lost one of their most talented naval commanders, and the fleet, now under the command of Menecrates' lieutenant Demochares, retreated to Sicily. The Caesarians cautiously maintained their position, but once they had become certain that the Pompeian fleet had left, began repairs on their ships in preparation for uniting with Octavian around Rhegium. Octavian had by now already reached Rhegium. Hearing that Sextus only had 40 ships in Messana, his generals urged him to attack immediately. However, not knowing of the events at Cumae, Octavian insisted on waiting for Calvisius and Menes. It proved a serious blunder, as the time he spent waiting allowed Demochares to return to Sicily successfully and reunite with Sextus. When news of the battle did reach Octavian, he decided to sail through the straits to meet the other portion of his fleet. As he did, however, his fleet was harassed by Sextus's ships that attacked along various points of the line. Octavian, either reluctant to fight in the straits or determined not to give battle without reinforcements, ordered his ships to continue without engaging, and several were cut off and destroyed. Some of his captains disobeyed the orders, turning to meet the Pompeians, one even successfully taking the flagship of Demochares, though the Pompeian managed to escape. Calvisius's fleet also...
That glass break noise is so satisfying. And I know I try to, as much as I can, just look at history, unbiased perspective, but I tend to pick favorites, like when I watch videos, history videos. And I like Octavian. I like Augustus. And so when I see he had a bad military decision, I get, military straticism. What's the word? Strategicism. His strategy in military affairs clearly isn't like his uncle, or like Caesar.
Arrived on the scene, but night soon fell, ending any fighting. Octavian's Sicilian invasion had got off to a poor start, many ships having been lost in the previous battle, and still more to Sextus's harassing tactics. Attempting to consolidate his forces, Octavian drew Calvisius's fleet up in a defensive formation, while he pulled his vessels close to the shore to conduct repairs. Disaster struck yet again, however, when a massive storm swept through. The Pompeian ships, which had managed to make it into Sicilian harbors, were safe, while Octavian's, close to the coast, were dashed against rocks. The notoriously treacherous waters of the straits crashed his ships into one another, with the infamous whirlpools drowning.
The monster Charybdis, known from Homeric myths, was likely inspired by the straits whirlpools.
many of the straits, crashed his ships into one another, with the infamous whirlpools drowning many who fell into the sea. Only Menace's squadron, which had the foresight to put out to open water, managed to avoid calamity. It was a scene of utter carnage, with the cries of men thrown overboard lasting throughout the night and crushing his men's morale. By the time the storm finally broke, most of Octavian's fleet, including the sailors, had been lost. By approximately the summer of 38 BC, Octavian
There are great whites in the Mediterranean, huh? Are there bull sharks? Okay, so there are tiger sharks and there are great white sharks. Okay, so I'm wondering if that was any of the casualties.
realized. By approximately the summer of 38 BC, Octavian realized that his invasion had been a failure, leaving the fleet and making for Vibo, warning his friends and generals to be prepared for any potential uprisings against him, and stationing men along the coast in preparation for an invasion of Italy by Sextus. When Sextus got wind of these events and how devastating the storm had been, he interpreted it as a sign of the gods' favor and proclaimed himself the son of Neptune. Despite the significant losses Octavian had suffered, Sextus did not press his advantage, likely because he was not confident that he would have the manpower to pull off an invasion of the mainland. Octavian, however, was not a man to give up easily. He sent word to Antony requesting his support, and perhaps most importantly, recalled Agrippa, who had been...
I thought you might have been teasing me, Rick, but... Okay. I thought you might have just been lying about Agrippa being in here. Mark Antony, man, I love him. But seems like since Caesar died, he lost a bit of his mojo or care.
Requesting his support, and perhaps most
Man,
importantly, recalled Agrippa, who had been governing in Gaul and quelling revolts.
Shit!
Octavian would prepare for yet another attempted invasion, and this time Agrippa would lead. Agrippa was made consul for 37 BC, despite being significantly under the traditional minimum age for the office, and immediately undertook the task of creating a vast fleet for Octavian. However, he soon realized that there was no harbor on the west coast of Italy to house such a large fleet.
Wait. Huh. They were born in the same year. How is it that it's so rare that and Augustus's birthday, they know the day, not just the year or the month, but they have the 23rd. Hey, we're both September babies. Let's go. He's 20 years later in September, but okay. So he's also 27, right?
That there was no harbor on the west coast of Italy to house such a large fleet. More importantly, he would need a port where the ships could be constructed secretively, free from attacks by Sextus's forces. Undeterred, Agrippa began the construction.
I'm sorry, guys. That I've been pausing way too much.
More importantly, he would need a port where the ships could be constructed secretively, free from attacks by Sextus's forces. Undeterred, Agrippa began the construction of one of the Roman Republic's greatest engineering achievements, the Portus Julius. Agrippa knew that Lake Averno would be hidden from any ships sailing the coast, so he planned for this to be the base of his harbor, linking Lake Averno to Lake Lucrino with a canal, and from Lucrino to the sea with a second canal. The harbor he built would prove to be large enough to hold the whole fleet and conduct training maneuvers. Combined with a large tunnel that led to the port from Cumae, the Portus Julius could build ships, train sailors, and supply without any risk of detection from the sea. It was a marvel of logistics and engineering, the ruins of which can still be seen under the waters today. Octavian's position improved further in the spring of 37 BC, when Antony arrived in Tarentum with 300 ships to assist in the invasion, and messages were sent to Lepidus in Africa to prepare his forces for the attack.
Sextus is screwed.
Octavian was not ready yet though, as many of his ships were still under construction. Antony, who was organizing his Parthian campaign, was frustrated at this delay, but persisted, hoping that Octavian would repay the favor by assisting whenever Antony's invasion of Parthia began. Octavian, however, was still angry at Antony for not having sent men to help the previous year. It is even possible that Octavian deliberately slowed the production of his own fleet to frustrate Antony's plans. On this occasion, Antony acted as the bigger...
Come on, man. Why do you gotta do this to me?
To frustrate Antony's plans. On this occasion, Antony acted as the bigger man, probably listening to the advice of his wife, Octavian's sister Octavia. He assured Octavian they were allies with no bad blood, working towards the same common goal. The two were reconciled, declaring that they and Lepidus would hold triumviral power for another 5 years, without consulting anyone else, including Lepidus himself. Octavian nonetheless...
It's all... Whenever there's a triumvirate, I see a pattern. I guess 2 isn't a pattern, but I see a pattern with triumvirates where it's really a diumvirate or a biumvirate. Because, like, there's 2 people, and then, like, they just have a third guy who's not so important and kept out of the loop and gets, like, a part of northern Africa when the other 2 triumvirates get, like, giant slices of the east and west Mediterranean.
Felt he had no choice but to delay the invasion again the following year. Antony, unable to postpone his Parthian invasion any longer, offered a compromise by gifting Octavian 130 ships in return for the promise of 4 of Octavian's legions. Octavian gladly accepted the offer. Meanwhile, Menas, for unknown reasons, defected yet again, going back to Sextus's side. Calvisius, who failed to report this to Octavian, was removed from his position, and Agrippa was made overall commander of Octavian's navy. By the spring of 36 BC, Octavian was ready. He had roughly 300 ships, including the
Finally!
130 of Antony under Antony's lieutenant Taurus, and 21 legions picked for the invasion. Lepidus was also ready in Africa with 70 warships, 12 legions, and auxiliaries. The plan was simple. Taurus would attack Sicily from the east, Lepidus from the south and west, and Octavian and Agrippa from the north. They would effectively attack Sicily from all sides and overwhelm it. The invasion began, but yet again it was plagued by disaster. Lepidus, sailing from Africa, was hit by a large storm that destroyed almost 1,000 supply ships in the crossing. The same storm also hit Octavian and Agrippa's section, forcing them to return to Italy to spend 30 days repairing their vessels. Despite these setbacks, however, Lepidus's contingent had successfully landed on Sicily, besieging Lilybaeum and winning over other cities in the area. In an attempt to capitalize on this foothold, Lepidus tried to transport 4 more legions over. However, they had not been provided with an escort to move them quickly, and elements of Sextus's fleet could attack them in the crossing, causing 2 legions worth of men to be lost in the fight. Nevertheless, Sextus still acted cautiously, keeping his fleet safe in port, and sending a relief force to Lilybaeum. This lack of offensive action
5,000 and 6,000 men.
This lack of offensive action caused Menas to once more change sides, defecting back to Octavian, who readily accepted him but ordered him to be watched closely and only hold limited command. when Octavian sailed his portion of the fleet to the Aeolian Islands and still got no response from Sextus, it encouraged him to be even more aggressive. Leaving Agrippa in command of the fleet, he returned to Italy to take 3 legions to Taurus in Tarentum, intending to lead Taurus's force personally to attack from the east. At the same time, Agrippa would continue attacking Sicily from the north. Agrippa left around 50 ships in port at Hiera and sailed with perhaps 100 ships to Mylae, where he had learned that Demochares was stationed with 40 ships, hoping to win a quick and easy victory. Sextus, meanwhile, heard of this movement and sailed personally to Demochares' position with a further 115 ships. When Agrippa realized he was now facing almost all of the Pompeian navy, he immediately sent word back to Hiera to bring up the rest of his ships as quickly as they could and drew up his fleet for battle. Sextus chose not to command the battle personally, instead observing from the shoreline and assigning command to his lieutenant Papias. The Pompeian fleet was slightly larger, and with years of naval experience were the better sailors, sailing in slightly smaller and faster ships, prioritizing naval skill and trained to disable enemy vessels. On the other hand, Agrippa's fleet had heavier and slower ships, built primarily for boarding enemy ships, to better utilize the Caesarian advantage in more experienced infantry.
Quick question. So speed on the ships in a navy is going to be crucial, right? In terms of fleeing away when you're outnumbered or pursuing when a lower numbered, when a fleet, your enemy fleet is retreating, right? And so that's big. I know they have sails. I rarely see them down in the animations, but I don't know how much they use it. But obviously rowing is a big way of how they move their ships. So did they like give their rowers like extra food and good nutrition and like super training and getting like jacked and big? Because that would be a giant factor if all of your rowers are bigger and stronger and obviously better trained and unison. But does anyone know that? Like, were rowers treated well because of the role they played?
On top of this, the greater size of Agrippa's ships meant that his missile troops on the ship's towers would have a slight height advantage. The battle commenced, the Pompeian ships using their greater maneuverability to destroy the Caesarian oars, aiming to isolate individual ships or small groups of the enemy to take them out of the battle. Pompeian ships that got too close were quickly grappled by the Caesarians and pulled closer. The Caesarians, from their higher decks and towers, showered the Pompeians with arrows and javelins before boarding, many Pompeians abandoning their ships and jumping overboard.
Tug of war?
During the course of the battle, Agrippa located Papias's ship.
Guys, like right there, perfect example. So you're grappled, but these guys are going to be trying to be rowing backwards. These guys are going to be trying to row backwards too in this direction. And so it's not like the grappler has any more power than the grapplee person being grappled, right? So
and javelins before boarding, many Pompeians abandoning their ships and jumping overboard. During the course of the battle, Agrippa located Papias's ship and engaged it with his own, shattering the hull with the initial ram. Papias was able to escape to another ship nearby and re-engaged. Still, Sextus from the shore realized that the battle was going poorly, and seeing Agrippa's reinforcements approaching on the horizon, ordered a withdrawal. The Pompeian ships were able to execute a well-ordered withdrawal to nearby shoals, where Agrippa's heavier and larger vessels would not be able to pursue them. Initially, Agrippa planned to blockade the fleet to keep them pinned, but convinced by his captains that he should not risk losing his victory to a storm, he agreed to withdraw. It had nonetheless been an overwhelming victory for the Caesarians, Agrippa losing just 5 ships and managing to capture or destroy 30. After numerous disastrous setbacks, Octavian's invasion of Sicily finally had its first significant success under Agrippa.
how is it taking this long?
Lepidus's siege of Lilybaeum was still ongoing, and the capture of some smaller towns in the area had given him a foothold in western Sicily. Hearing of Agrippa's success, Octavian was eager to capitalize on it and secure a similar base in the east, sailing with 3 legions and the rest of the navy, and landing around Tauromenium. Sextus, however, was a shrewd commander, and not to be underestimated.
Clearly.
Leaving a small portion of his fleet at Mylae to give the impression that the harbour was still full, Sextus sailed with most of his ships under the cover of darkness towards Tauromenium. Octavian would soon find himself almost completely surrounded and fighting for his life. In our next episode, we will cover this battle and the rest of Octavian's Sicilian invasion, so make sure you have subscribed and pressed the bell button. Recently, we've started releasing weekly Patreon and YouTube member exclusive videos. Join the ranks of patrons and YouTube members via the link in the description or by pressing the button under the video.
Great videos, always love Kings and Generals, top tier history channel, absolutely phenomenal, professional in all ways. Storytelling, animations, the flow, the mapping, the maps and combat and stuff. It's awesome. So regarding Pompey, is this the same? Is this Pompey related to the Pompey that got, in Egypt and his head was presented to Caesar and Caesar was like disgusted, and who Caesar had like a big battle in Dalmatia or on the western coast of modern day Croatia and Albania and Greece, somewhere along there. Are they related? Is this the son or the nephew or something like that? And number 2, more importantly, is how is Sextus, obviously he's a very capable commander, military mind, tactician, strategist. But I mean, Octavian, I lost some respect for him, but doesn't mean, this is one video, so it doesn't mean I don't like him. And, just because you're not a great military commander doesn't mean he's not a great emperor or great in political matters or other matters. So I'm not saying like he's gone down the drain in my book, but the rumor or like the theory that the possibility that he might have done, the troop movement out of spite for being mad at Mark Antony and then not going across when he should have over here, being too hesitant. And I mean, he's just no Caesar. He's certainly no Hannibal. And Pompey seems extremely competent, and he's being attacked on like 3 fronts. Here, and here. Lepidus, Agrippus, Octavian, and he's still been holding out. Love y'all. Keep learning. Hope y'all enjoyed that and can answer. I had a lot of questions. Enter some of them in the comments, as many as you can. I'd really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next time. All right. Bye, guys.